Am I making yet another puff sleeve dress? Yes, I am. So I was browsing on Instagram for clothing inspiration, like I always do, and I found this absolutely gorgeous organza puff sleeve dress from a brand called Selkie, and I knew absolutely that I had to recreate it. However, it is pretty impractical for a 16-year-old. I don't really know when I'm going to be wearing this dress if I were to make it. So there are two things I'm going to be changing about it. One is the fabric. The original is made out of organza, which to me is a very fancy fabric. So I want to tone it down and make it casual. So I'm going to be making my dress out of cotton. The second thing is the bodice. The original bodice is very short and ends right under the bust, which makes the dress look very young and childish, but in a good way. I want to be able to wear this dress in college as well, so I'm going to be making the bodice a lot longer to my waist so that it can look more mature. So let's get started on this dress. Of course, I started out with the easiest part of the dress, which is the skirt. So I folded my fabric in half and I cut out a half circle skirt, and I will link a tutorial so that you can learn as well when you try to recreate this dress. Now, for this half circle skirt, I actually made the radius a lot larger than what my usual radius is. Based on my waist measurement, the radius of my skirt is usually 8.5 inches, but for this particular skirt, I made it 15 inches instead. That way, when I gather it to attach it to my bodice, it'll be really gathered. After cutting out my skirt, I sewed a basting stitch on the top and on the bottom of the skirt. On the bottom, the basting stitch is going to serve as a guide when I have to hem my skirt, and on the top, the basting stitch is going to help me gather my skirt when I have to attach it to my bodice. I made the basting stitch black so that I could spot it easily later and take it out. After that, I was ready to cut out all the pieces for my bodice, so I used a pattern that I already made and I cut out double the amount of pieces for my bodice. I wanted to make two bodices. One is going to be the shell and one is going to be the lining on the inside. So in total, I had 2 center front pieces, 4 side front pieces, and 4 back pieces. Okay guys, I cut out all the pieces, but of course I made a mistake. The back pieces are supposed to have an armhole like this to match the armhole over here, but of course I made it straight, just like I did in my last puff sleeve dress video. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm going to have to recut all 4 back pieces so that they have an armhole. So once I do that, I'm going to come back and show you the right pieces. Okay, so I fixed the 4 back pieces, so now they have an armhole just like the side front, so now I can attach my sleeve. And now I'm going to pin all of these right sides together for both the shell and the lining, and then I'm going to sew them up. Okie dokie, I have finished sewing up the seams in both the lining and the shell. This is what it looks like on the inside. I just cut away all the extra seam allowance, and this is what it looks like on the outside. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put these 2 bodices right sides together and sew all along the top. Okay, I finished sewing up the bodice. This is what it looks like right now. I have the shell on the outside, of course, and the lining on the inside. So now, what I'm going to do is attach the skirt to the bodice. To attach the skirt to the top, first I pulled on the threads of that basting stitch that I put in earlier to gather my skirt. And then after that, I laid my skirt on top of my bodice, right sides together, and evened out all the gathers so that it fit the bodice perfectly. Then I pinned it all together. Since I was already sitting on the floor and I had my fabric near me, I decided to cut out my sleeves as well. So what I'm using here is the slash and spread method. What I did first is I traced the sleeve of a t-shirt, just a regular cotton t-shirt. I cut that pattern into strips, and then I'm spreading the strips out onto my fabric. I made sure that all the strips were evenly spread out, and then I cut out my sleeves. Okay, so I just finished sewing the skirt to the top. This is what it looks like so far. Okay, I'm really excited about this. What I think I'm gonna do now is put the zipper in the back. I'm gonna be using an invisible zipper because that's all I have. So let's get to it. Here I'm just sewing the invisible zipper to my dress, so I changed my foot to a zipper foot, and then I sewed my zipper right sides together to my dress. And just to let you know, the length of my zipper is 14 inches, so it opens well below the waist to allow me to slip in and out of the dress comfortably. Hello. So today is a new day, and last night I got quite a bit done. After sewing up the zipper, I sewed the rest of the skirt shut. So from the bottom of the zipper all the way down to the hem, I just sewed it closed. And then I finished hemming the skirt all around. So to do that, I used that basting stitch that I put down earlier as a guide, and I folded up the hem once, then folded it up again, and then sewed it down. So now that those things are out of the way, I just have to sew on the sleeves, and then we'll be done. Can you believe?
Can you believe?
So there's been a change of plans. Alright, so here's what the dress looks like so far. I tried it on last night just to see if the fit is right, which it is. And I realized that I could tuck it in to see what a shorter bodice would look like, just like this. And I realized that I actually like the shorter bodice better. So I think I'm going to cut the bodice to make it shorter. And to do that, I'm gonna have to take out the zipper, separate the bodice from the skirt, cut the bodice, and then do everything again. So I'll have to reattach the skirt, reattach the zipper, and then I can move on to the sleeves. I've got my work cut out for me, so I'm gonna get started. Now we begin the process of taking apart the dress. So first I seam ripped the zipper out of the dress, and then I seam ripped the skirt away from the bodice to separate the two. After separating the bodice from the skirt, I pinned 2 inches up all along the bodice because I actually sewed all along the bodice to keep the seams in place so that when I cut it, they didn't unravel. After cutting my bodice to make it shorter, I was ready to attach the skirt again, so I sewed a new basting stitch since I took out the original one, and I gathered it to fit the bodice. Here, I'm just evening out all the gathers, making sure it fits the bodice perfectly, and then I pinned and sewed them right sides together. Alright, here is the new dress. The bodice isn't as short as the original. The bodice on the original dress is like right under the bust, but I made it a little longer and I'm really happy with this length. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to attach the sleeves, and then we'll do all the finishing touches after that. Alright, here is what the sleeves look like. The first thing I did is I sewed up the sleeve so that it's now a tube, and then I hemmed the bottom using the same method that I used to hem the skirt. Over here, I have already pinned one of the sleeves to the bodice. Let me just open it up and show you what it looks like on the inside. Alright, the first thing I did was I matched up the seam of the sleeve to the side seam of the bodice, which is pretty much the very bottom of the armhole. Then after that, I pinned both sides until there was no more bodice to pin to. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew all along these pins, and afterwards we're going to be able to put in the elastic at the top. Okay, so I just finished sewing the sleeve to the bodice right sides together all along the armhole, And for the rest of the sleeve that's not attached to the bodice, what I did is I folded over the seam allowance twice to create a little channel for my elastic. So I'm going to be sewing all along these pins, and I'm going to make sure to leave a gap at the end of each end of the channel, because I'm going to be feeding the elastic through and then bringing it out the other side. Okay, so I'm trying on the dress to see how much elastic I'm gonna need up here. As you can see, it's already pretty tight. I definitely underestimated how much room I would need for it to scrunch up. So, I'm gonna put elastic in anyways, just to add a little bit of extra security and to make sure it stays on my shoulder, but it's not gonna get that scrunched look that I want. But that's okay, because these things happen. Okie dokie, the elastic is in the sleeves. I got a little bit of a scrunch out of it. It's not too much, but I'm still very happy with it. I also put a little hand stitch on the ends of the elastic to attach them to the sleeves to make sure that they don't shift around. And I also hand sewed the little gaps shut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach elastic to the bottom of the sleeve to scrunch it up. I'm thinking that I'm just going to stretch and sew elastic directly onto the sleeve, so let's do it. Stretching and sewing the elastic did not work, so instead I just cut a strip of fabric, folded the ends inward, and then sewed the entire strip to my sleeve. And this is going to be a little channel for me to feed my elastic through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a safety pin, attach it to my I'm going to take a safety pin, attach it to my elastic, and then feed that elastic through here. I actually already did it in this sleeve, and look at how scrunched up it is. It looks really good, and I'm very happy with it. Alright, all the major parts of this dress are done. All that's left are the finishing touches, like ironing it and sewing over all the raw edges inside the dress, and also putting a closure on top of the zipper. And after that, we are all done. I can't wait to show you.